And then they gave me a call and said, listen guys, because we're gonna open again, can you work for another hotel to cook food for the quarantine people coming back home from overseas? And well, I pretty much straight away I said, yeah, sure, let's do it. And in your head you sort of think, okay, is it gonna be a good day or a bad day?
If there's one good thing I can say about the pandemic, it's that it's connected me with so many new people. One of those is Agustin Hernandez, who has been, we've been chatting on Instagram. He's big on the emojis, and he's just he just always has good energy coming my way. Agustin is 53. He's an out-of-work chef, and I was reading back over our messages, Agustin, and one of the things you said really struck me. It was that you came to Australia with nothing, and nothing is your strength. So there's so many things I want to talk to you about today. But first of all, hello and welcome to Dirty Linen.
Hello. Thank you for having me. And bear with me. I'm a little bit nervous. I've never been kind of exposed to the public, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's just a chat, so we're super happy to be chatting to you, and I know that your experiences are going to mean a lot to many people who are listening. Now, the first thing that I want to talk to you about, Agustin, is that you were a chef in Melbourne during the hotel quarantine period. We've heard so much about hotel quarantine. There's an inquiry into it at the moment. We know that the people who were infected with COVID-19 that were working at the hotel quarantine in the city, that many of those people were the source of the virus that caused our second wave. So it's going to be a big thing in the story of Melbourne for decades to come. That is for sure. You were there in the thick of it, at the centre of it, and I would love you to talk about what took you to that job and what it was like to be there.
What took me to the job basically is because the company that I work for is quite large, so they have several hotels. And when I thought that, they sort of more or less said, look, it's almost to the day when, I don't know if you remember, or anyone of the audience, that when Qantas was told to shut down by 80% or something like that, literally 2 days after, that's when I lost my job. Or I wouldn't say lost my job, it was just, with the logistics of it all.
You didn't have the hours.
Well, yeah, but they pretty much shut down the hotel. And to their merit, they actually accepted a lot of homeless people, whom they still staying there and whatsoever. So I know of a really sticky situation. They did good. And anyway, and I was just pretty much on a standby. I didn't know what was going to happen. So since I haven't had a holiday for a while, I didn't really become concerned about all of it. And then they gave me a call and said, listen guys, because we're going to open again, can you work for another hotel to supply or cook food for the quarantine people coming back home from overseas? And well, I pretty much straight away I said, yeah, sure, let's do it. And yes, it was to your second part. It was rather tense and probably even eerie. How I don't know what experience the general public have, but when you walk into a room and you can feel the tension, even though there's people in the hospitality industry, when you walk into a kitchen or you walk into a restaurant to start your shift, you just feel a tension. And then and in your head you sort of think, okay, is it gonna be a good day or a bad day? So yeah, and it's just that's across the industry. It's got nothing to do with the quarantine. I think it's more accentuated or more predominant, that people feel that tension and they don't mean to. Yeah, but it was quite tense.
because the whole industry was closing down around us. I guess nobody knew what we were in the thick of. It was just beginning then. So, as far as being in hotel quarantine, what kinds of things did you see in the hotel that, that were different from just working in a hotel in a normal day, a normal week for normal guests?
I did see a lot of security guards. And in the back of my mind, because I was already, for the lack of a better phrase, preconditioned through the news that security guards are being used for safety and this and that, but they didn't quite explain which hotels or whatever. They just said an overall kind of action. When I went there, I mean, when you see things through the news, it's kind of like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. And then when you get there, you just feel a different tension. And you walk into the hotel in a normal day, you gotta write down your name, what time you walked in, you wash your hands or you disinfect your hands with the antiseptic bottles that they have floating around. And you walk in and you adjust, you do your greetings to your work colleagues, and you see a lot of not you, but I saw a lot of security guards floating around.
Mm. And do
Yeah.
the security guards seem to be, I don't know, did they seem very focused on their job? Did you see other medical staff? Did you see other things in the hotel that gave you a sense that there was a quarantine operation going on?
Yes, it's weird because with the security guards, you thought, oh, okay, they're trying to make sure no one from a stranger comes in from outside. I understood that, and they were very friendly and they were very chill. Like they didn't give you the ABC questioning and so on. Who are you? And if they didn't know me, and they would call the main office just to check on my name that I'm actually a worker there. So that was pretty quick type of thing and so on. And that's a level of a bit of wow, but I was still relaxed about it because when growing up, you go to a nightclub and you have interaction with the security guards, so you don't really cross in your mind how serious it is. The poignant moments that during my working days there was at a time when being two hotels join and then you travel from one kitchen to the other and so on. I saw like a little group of 4 or 5 nurses with PPE in the lift. That's when it kind of hits home, I guess, or reality hits you a little bit harder, and without any thought, I just froze. I didn't know whether to walk into the lift or not. And they all had a giggle, and they said, "Oh look, come on in. We haven't seen any quarantine, what do you call them, clients or patients or
Yeah.
guests or poor bastards." And yeah, and sort of, oh, okay, so and they just got off their floor and headed off to whatever they usually do, and I headed off to the other kitchen to get my produce and so on. But that was the big one when I saw all the nurses in the PPE. So yeah.
So you said it was quite tense. I mean, as the days went on, did it just feel like another job, or did you feel like you were at the epicenter of I guess, Victoria's action to keep the virus contained?
No, I don't know about the other guys. What happens in our industry, we can be very short fused with each other and very patient with our customers. So because we didn't really touch on customers, we were pretty much short fuse and informative sort of like ABC type of work. So it's kind of hard to understand whether we're tense or it's just normal service, if that makes sense. Because see, I judge it this way. At the end of the day, we're all smiles and say our good nights and see you tomorrow or whatever. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit what is it? Schizophrenic, if that makes sense, in a polite way. Um, but in my own view, I felt tense out of the whole thing. I was lucky enough that most of the work I did was on my own in the late afternoon to the evening, preparing for the next day. So I was pretty much in a kitchen on my own. There was another kitchen which did the bulk of setting up the whole thing. And every time I went to the kitchen to ask for something, there was very regimented. Okay, you have 200, which one of those things that continuously happen in our industry now. Dietaries. So they have a huge list of when I mean, and that really created even more tension. Okay, room A, room B, no, room C is like this. The room D is like that. That's the difference between one and the other, and it was just that kind of organized chaos.
Okay. And if you were in quarantine, if you were as we say, a client or a customer or a patient, I don't know either, could they order whatever they wanted from the room service menu?
Yes, that was my thing. I was the one. Okay, so I would do mass production for the bulk of a set menu for everybody. That was the first level to cook the bulk. The second level was to distribute the food. They also did bulk cooking, of course, because one person cannot cook for 200 in a 2 day notice. It's just way too much. So you have then the second group, which is a team which will distribute and cook that extra bits and pieces and distribute the dietary requirements. And then there was and you could tell by the 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, touching 8:30 mark, that people wanted something different. That's when I came in. I used to cook all pretty much the volume of the a la carte menu if they didn't quite enjoy what they were eating, or they wanted something different or whatsoever. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, like I don't have any dietaries myself, but I can imagine if I was in hotel quarantine for 2 weeks, I would just be so bored, and you have so little control that I feel like maybe I would just need to try to like have some measure of choice and create some kind of annoying dietary for you guys. So given that we heard, after you were working there, we heard about the virus escaping from hotel quarantine. Did that surprise you, or did you feel like that was a situation that was waiting to happen?
Well, that's right. And that was like a bit of an eye opener. This is not an intellectual exercise, what I'm about to say. But when I saw the nurses being covered from top to bottom to go to the rooms of the, let's call it the guest, they need to be recognized that it was unwanted from their side anyway to be there. So the guests were there, and the nurses are covered from top to bottom. And then you see the security guards. This is the controversial part of it all. Sure, they were in suits and looking the part and whatsoever. But when I hear, okay, to be fair, I didn't see it, but I hear that they sort of go to each floor when somebody wants to have a smoke, have a walkabout, and kind of chill out a bit. A security guy is present and whatsoever. But at no point did I see the security guards as much protected, only with the mask, and they were not as much protected as the nurses. It conflicts your mind. It just conflicts your mind. It's like me telling, in simple terms, you're in an operating room. All the doctors and nurses are covered from top to bottom, but then the person who has to come in to get rid of the linen is not protected. It just comes in, picks up the linen, and walks away. It doesn't make sense in my mind. Yeah, so it was a weird thing to see, that's all.
Agustin, we had another situation in Melbourne that it's going to be a big part of the Melbourne story when we look back upon the pandemic, and that was the hard lockdown of the social housing towers in North Melbourne, Kensington, and Flemington. Now, I understand that you lived in those towers for a time when you were new to Australia. Can you talk about your experience there and what you think it would have been like for those people when those towers were locked down?
Yeah, look, I lived in North in that particular block for probably about 5 years or so, and all in all, I lived in that block of units for 15 years. Meaning, I used to live in the walk-ups. Then the walk-ups were demolished, and units were built, but then we were shifted to the block that was televised with the people in there. And it's heartbreaking that we still don't understand that when such a big volume of people live in a building, if it's not taken properly care of, it actually gets very messy. And you're looking at the lift breaks area, the moment in the year, and even if you have good caretakers there whatsoever, the action is not implemented until it's totally broken down, and then it becomes a real problem. And I thought it would change, but it seems that it had never changed. And I'm talking about more than 20 years ago. Um, yeah, and it's and to me anyway. Look, long story short, it's very heartbreaking how they were treated.
Yeah. Um, so you're originally from the Canary Islands, is that right?
Hmm. That's right. Yes.
Okay. And you came to Australia in what year?
1977. I was 10 years old.
Oh, wow. You've been here a long time. so,
Yeah, I'm almost an Aussie, almost.
so I think a lot of people that work in the hospitality industry have been, wondering what's next, and they've had time to consider their future. And I know that you've done a lot of thinking as well as you've been, working around the house and working here and working there, but also having a lot of time to think. So tell me how you see the future for yourself as a chef, Agustin. What do you see a place for yourself in the industry in the future?
Uh, the short answer is no. Uh, and it's not because the lack of my experience. It's more to do that even when I'm in the industry, a young wave of chefs are coming in and whatsoever. So it's almost like a personal. Okay, let me pull back a little bit. I never think as on my own or whatsoever. I always think, okay, I reached this level, in my behavior, what type of ethics do I need to think about? Because I've had my run of 20 plus years, probably 23 now, and there's a new wave of young people coming. And I measure in my thoughts that they will pick on the young generation in order to be in the industry, regardless of how much experience I have. So it's kind of, I have no idea where the industry will go. Of course, I would love to keep on going in the industry, but I don't see it highly likely.
What will you do? Do you see other options for yourself?
Well, at the moment, coincidentally, probably yesterday or the day before, homeschooling is advertising some type of free courses and so on. So it's about, I don't know, somebody. Uh, I don't know. It's kind of blank. I just need to keep on reading and working out with, at 53. Um, and I've got, let's see what we're looking at, 53. Let me be generous, give myself another 10 years of work. And I was like, oh, I can train myself to something which it takes about 3 years or so, and so on. And then the idea of coming back down to lower wages because I'm a learning apprentice or a learning intern or whatever, that is a little bit tricky, because also, um, I know I can, for the lack of a better explaining, I can clean toilets and earn more than an apprentice, depending what type of apprenticeship, obviously.
Yeah, well, it's an issue. I mean, you've got a lot of working years ahead of you, and I think you're right that I think employers would look towards younger people coming through, whether that's for good reasons or not. But I think the longevity for people in the hospitality industry it's a big issue, and I guess the pathway towards owning businesses and being an employer is going to suit some people, but it's not going to be the right pathway for everybody. And I mean, what's going to happen? What are you going to do? It's like, yeah.
Yeah, it is like, see, it's very different if things as normal and I decide, you know what? Yeah, I had enough of cooking. I enjoy it. And my wife is telling me to stop cooking too much at home. Put it that way. Like it's just in me. I always say that I didn't choose cooking. Cooking chose me. To give you an idea, I actually did a couple of years of electronics engineering in Swinburne. But it wasn't my thing, even though I enjoyed it. It wasn't my thing. Then I became a Spanish interpreter, and I did my thing again for 4 or 5 years. That was under a wonderful Jeff Kennett. I'm being sarcastic there, by the way.
I'm just leaving that hanging. I'm not, yeah, I'm not a massive fan of Jeff Kennett.
Yeah,
So
I'm not either.
just leave that there.
Yeah, I'm not, actually. Sorry, it just
It's not just because I hate the Hawthorn Football Club as well, but I certainly do not align with Jeff Kennett on many of his actions as Premier. But anyway,
Ironically, I actually see, because back then I was nice and young and all energetic and go getter whatsoever. So when I found out that Jeff Kennett came in, that's when I decided, after 4 years of doing interpreting, he started cutting a lot of finance for interpreting. So that's when I became a cook. That was my next option. Because yeah, I could plan it, because it's kind of like, oh yeah, I got a plan here. I wasn't fast. Not that now I'm married, whatever, but even now I still think the same as if I am a single man. My decisions are always as a single man, and a push for that because it gives me more energy and perception. Anyway, so I quit interpreting, which was damn good money, for cooking. And I cried for 2 years, and here I am. And I literally mean I cried for 2 years. It was awful at the beginnings, and anyway, but now it's different. It's just this happened. What type of training am I able to do mentally and physically? The whole game changes. I'll give it a benefit. My mind is still as sharp as it can be, but my body is saying, "I'm gonna leave you soon." It's a different.
it's a dilemma. It's a
Yeah.
dilemma, and I think a lot of people, for different reasons, whether it's business related, whether it's their body's telling them it's time to stop, whether they're feeling like there aren't as many opportunities. There are a lot of people on the cusp of some interesting decisions and certainly a lot of uncertainty. Agustin, I think you're such an interesting person to talk to. I love hearing different voices around me and especially in this podcast. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your perspective. It's really great. I look forward to chatting to you more on Instagram in the meantime, but it's really great to bring your voice to my audience on Dirty Linen today. Thank you.
No, look, my real pleasure. Like, as you can see, I can give you many other stories, but for another time, if ever. Look, the only thing I can say is not to be optimistic, but to have convictions as a person for anyone in the industry. Just to have create or build a conviction that even when sometimes we're struggling blindly, you will see results of some kind. More important, just to be in touch with each other. More important is to make sure you have a roof, you are clean, and you're being fed. The rest, you can work it out. But just to have the fundamentals of one's existence, the rest will work out. It just slowly and be gentle with yourself to create a conviction and then move along from that. And I'm sure something will happen.
Beautiful. Very wise words. Thank you so much for sharing them. This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about. We spend a week thrashing around each issue, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.